Well, it has been a crazy week to what we've seen in the markets, and a crazy time that will once again continue as we move through planting and tariffs and all the different talks that are taking place. And Jeff Peterson is joining us from Heartland Farm Partners. And thank you so much for coming in to talk about the markets. I think first and foremost, it's been a tough week. I mean, we saw maybe a little bit of ebb. We thought there were going to be some positive numbers, but too much red on the screen this week. Oh,
it's been really hard, and we've been telling them that you've just been selling, Susan. So I mean, that's kind of been what our story has been. So if you get little extra phone calls, that's what it's about.
That's what it is. And what are we going to see with these markets? I mean, obviously, there's so many factors that have built into this week's down trade.
Yeah, there really is. And I think if we start off, the whole environment we're working in is the Chinese trade talks. And then on top of that, we do have a little bit of an improving weather window coming up. Get through this weekend, we've got a window here in the west, and it looks like the eastern corn belt has a little bit longer window. And then on top of that, you've got the talk about, what are acres going to do because of the weather, prevent plant, and is that going to come into play? And then you've got everybody concerned about, will USDA throw us a surprise in the WASDE report? And then in addition to that, you've got a situation where the funds have continued to sell, and that's been the path of least resistance. And if we remember back, that's a path that really started clear back at the end of December. So they've just continued to extend their bigger positions that they've had on the short side.
So let's break that down. Let's start out with China talks. Last week we thought, aha, we're going into this. This is going to be the home run heading into a Thursday, and we got one more trade on a Friday of discussions. It doesn't look like we're going to come to any sort of agreement this week.
It really doesn't. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are hopeful that that could happen. But really, if we dig into it, I think we'd have to say, what changed? How did this go from getting ready to go ahead and have an agreement to all of a sudden we're talking about tariffs again? And I think if we roll back in time, really, we go back 2 weeks, go back to the 26th and 27th of April, and what we had back then is that there was a meeting that China had. It was the Belt and Road Initiative. And in that time, that's really their way of really helping bring infrastructure all across really Europe and all across what used to be the old Silk Road. And they had actually 40 individuals who were heads of state from all over the world attending that meeting. And that really gave them some confidence that this program's going forward from them, and that can help spur their economy. And then in addition to that, they've seen some GDP growth numbers come out, about 6.4% growth, which made them feel more confident. But there's one thing that got telegraphed from the U.S. that I'm hearing. As they heard Trump talk about our economy, 3.2% GDP growth was good, but they heard him actually kind of talking about and praising the Chinese economy, but yet putting a lot of pressure on the Federal Reserve and saying, wait a minute, what are they doing with these interest rates? They saw that as a sign that maybe our economy wasn't as strong as what it should have been or could have been, and they saw that as weakness, and they believed that as a result, the USB may be more open to compromise. And so what they did, they took a harder stance. And that's really what kind of got the ball rolling.
Are we going to continue to see this transparency? You and I were talking about that within this trade negotiations. When we look back to years past when there were negotiations, everything was tight-lipped until it was signed, sealed, and delivered. But now we can look right through.
Oh, I know. We can see that right away. And that is a big difference. And I don't honestly know if we should have this much transparency with these trade talks, because it's making it really hard. Because anytime you have really hard negotiations between two countries, and that's what we're seeing, you're going to end up having both sides, the bulls and the bears, disappointed at different times. But I do think we're just going to have to be ready for this type of transparency going forward.
So in a perfect world, we get some sort of negotiation taking place with China. We move forward with them. We get the weather working out. Is that what it's going to take to get this market turned around?
It really is. We can probably see a turnaround without necessarily a trade deal, but really in order for that to happen, what we're going to have to end up doing is we're going to end up having to see us get to a point where the funds and the buyers are confident that we've actually got a problem with the supply side. Some type of problem with acres or some type of problem with yields.
And that definitely could come to fruition. We're sitting here waiting for a lot of planters to even get moving when we look at, South Dakota, parts of North Dakota, Minnesota.
Yeah, there really is. We're sitting here right now at 23% complete on planting. And we started doing some projections. We dug in this a little bit deeper, saying, what does this look like? We think maybe if we go down the road another week, maybe we're 10% complete, get us to 33%. But last year, we were actually 62% complete. And the 5-year average was actually, at that point, 63% complete. And then we said, what if we go down the road another week after that? we probably say that maybe we pick up 20% because the Eastern Corn Belt does get to be a little bit better, but that still only gets us to 53% complete, and the 5-year average 2 weeks from now would be 81%. That will start to get the market nervous.
So is this going to be a growing season, east versus west again this year?
It's kind of shaping up that way. It didn't really look like that initially, but because the Eastern Corn Belt actually looks like they're going to get a little bit wider window to plant, maybe once we get past this weekend, then we're going to get wet in the west again. But I think what's going to come down to is really at the end, how late do these crops go in? Because if we get 2 weeks out and we're only 53% planted, there's going to be a lot of people talking about prevent plant in a bigger way. They're going to be talking about 2011 when we had over 9 million acres of prevent plant. And they're also going to be talking about 2013 when we had over 6 million acres of prevent plant. And then they're going to have to start talking about reductions in yield.
Some of that prevent plant, could it be because of the flooding that we're seeing and continue to see on the Missouri and the Mississippi?
You know, I think that's exactly right. There's going to be some from along the Mississippi, there's going to be some from along Missouri, and then there's going to be some because we've just had too much rain and we've just got these wet pockets out in the different fields that's going to cause it. So it's a type of year where you get it from multiple sources.
So finally, are there going to be any concerns, barge traffic movement, because of the issues on the Mississippi?
You know, it's continually concerns on that, and that's had a problem with the fertilizer movement to be able to get fertilizer to areas that they need. But it's also a concern as we start talking about getting the exports out. And that's why we've actually seen some really strong levels over on the rail side, because some of the different companies have had to resort to other modes of transportation or bring it from other parts of the country because they couldn't get the barge traffic where they needed to.
All right, finally, what are we going to have to look at as we have one more trading day left, heading into the weekend, into next week?
Well, going into that, keep an eye very closely, obviously, what the crop report ends up saying. That's going to be very important. The weather. Do we see any changes in the weather that either opens this window up to give us a wider window to get more planted, more than the week in the west, and really probably 10 days in the east? And then really it's all eyes are going to be on what happens tonight as these Chinese trade talks get going.
It's going to make for some interesting times. Thanks so much, Jeff, for joining us.
You're welcome.